Marlo Pierce, 34, sat stunned at the polished mahogany dining table as her sister's words hung in the air like poison. "You're a failure, Marlo. Always have been, always will be." The Christmas dinner she'd spent weeks planning lay forgotten between them, steam still rising from the untouched turkey. What her family didn't know was that Marlo had been silently supporting them for years. Tonight, something inside her finally snapped. By morning, she would cancel every payment she'd ever made and watch their perfect lives crumble. Before I dive deeper into how my sister's cruel words at Christmas dinner led to the most satisfying revenge I've ever taken, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and if you enjoy family revenge drama stories like mine, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how karma finally caught up with my entitled sister and the family who never appreciated my sacrifices. Growing up in suburban Boston, I lived in the permanent shadow of my older sister Vanessa. 3 years my senior, with golden blonde hair, a Harvard education, and our parents' unwavering adoration. She was perfection personified, at least on paper. Our father, a cardiothoracic surgeon, and our mother, a corporate attorney, had created a dynasty with Vanessa as their heir apparent. I was the afterthought, the safety child, the backup plan. From the moment Vanessa brought home her first perfect report card, the pattern was set. Her dance recitals were family events with bouquets and celebrations. Mine were attended by our housekeeper when my parents had more important commitments. Her high school graduation speech as valedictorian made local news. My college acceptance to NYU was acknowledged with a distracted, "That's nice, honey," over breakfast. I learned early to seek validation elsewhere. While Vanessa collected accolades and awards, I built genuine friendships. While she mastered the art of impressing our parents, I developed resilience and self-reliance. The constant comparison stung, but I convinced myself that one day they would really see me for who I was. That day never came. Instead, the dynamic intensified as we entered adulthood. Vanessa married Bradley Henderson, a surgeon like our father, in a $250,000 wedding featured in Boston Magazine. I attended alone, having recently ended a relationship with Daniel, a talented musician my parents deemed unsuitable. The wedding toast my father gave still echoes in my mind. "Vanessa, you've never disappointed us a day in your life." What they didn't see, what they never bothered to notice, was that while Vanessa projected success, her foundation was built on sand. Her Harvard education was funded by our parents. Her perfect Beacon Hill townhouse was a wedding gift. The luxury car she drove was leased under our father's name. Her designer wardrobe came from our mother's connections. Meanwhile, I had built something real. After graduating from NYU, I turned my graphic design side hustle into a thriving digital marketing agency. By 30, I had 15 employees, clients across 3 continents, and a comfortable condo I'd purchased myself in Cambridge. I kept my success quiet, partly because modesty felt natural, but mostly because I'd learned long ago that my achievements would never measure up in my family's eyes. The pattern might have continued indefinitely if not for what happened 3 years ago. Our father suffered a minor heart attack, ironic for a cardiac surgeon. Though he recovered quickly, the incident revealed troubling financial realities. His medical practice had been mismanaged for years, and the lavish lifestyle my parents maintained had drained their savings. Vanessa and Bradley, despite their prestigious careers, were leveraged to the hilt, with debt living far beyond their means to maintain appearances. I discovered this accidentally while helping my mother organize insurance paperwork during my father's hospital stay. The revelation stunned me. The family that had made me feel inadequate for decades was financially underwater. Without thinking, I offered help anonymously. Through a series of shell companies and carefully structured transactions, I began covering my parents' mortgage payments, Vanessa's children's private school tuition, and even the lease on my father's Mercedes. For 3 years, I was their silent benefactor, watching from the shadows as they continued to praise Vanessa's brilliance while treating me as an afterthought. I told myself I was being the bigger person that family takes care of family. In reality, I was still that little girl desperately seeking approval, hoping that somehow, someday, my worth would be recognized. That Christmas dinner was supposed to be different. I'd recently landed a major contract that would expand my business internationally. For once, I planned to share my success to finally step into the light. I spent weeks preparing the perfect meal, selecting thoughtful gifts, rehearsing how I would casually mention my company's growth. Perhaps this would be the moment they'd finally see me. I couldn't have been more wrong. The truth about my financial support for my family remained my most closely guarded secret. I'd set up the payments through a labyrinth of LLCs and trust funds, creating an illusion that the money came from a distant relative's estate. My parents and Vanessa never questioned this unexpected windfall, they simply accepted it as their due. Another example of the universe rewarding their excellence. The arrangement began simply enough. After discovering my father's financial troubles during his hospital stay, I established the first transfer $12,000 to cover their property tax bill that had gone unpaid for 2 quarters. I still remember my mother's casual mention during a phone call. "Oh, the most wonderful thing happened. Apparently, your father's great-aunt Judith left a trust that's just been discovered." Such perfect timing, great-aunt Judith didn't exist. I was the mysterious benefactor, but hearing the relief in my mother's voice gave me a satisfaction I hadn't anticipated. For once, I had solved a problem they couldn't. Even if they didn't know it was me, I knew. That knowledge became a quiet source of power. Over the next 3 years, my support expanded methodically. When Vanessa complained about the cost of private school for her twins, Mason and Madison, a scholarship mysteriously materialized. When my father's medical practice needed new equipment, an anonymous investor appeared. When my mother's law firm downsized and her partnership income decreased, their mortgage payments somehow reduced. All told, I had funneled nearly $457,000 to my family over 3 years, money that could have expanded my business further or bought me the waterfront property I'd been eyeing. Instead, it preserved the facade of my family's perfect life while they continued to treat me as an afterthought. The most painful part wasn't the money, it was witnessing how my family spoke about me when they thought I couldn't hear. At Thanksgiving the previous month, I arrived early to help my mother prepare dinner. From the kitchen, I overheard my father and Vanessa in the living room. "Marlo seems to be doing well with her little website business," my father said, though I owned a full-service digital marketing agency, not a little website business. Vanessa's laugh cut through me. "Dad, she designs Instagram posts for local restaurants. Let's not pretend she's running a real company. At least she's finally supporting herself, I guess." "She's always been uncomfortable with mediocrity," my father replied. "Not everyone has your drive, Vanessa." I stood frozen turkey baster in hand as they continued dismantling my life's work. That night, I smiled through dinner, passed the cranberry sauce, and said nothing. The payments continued. What they didn't know was that my little website business had just been approached by a major international holding company about a potential acquisition. The offer on the table would make me a millionaire several times over. I had scheduled meetings with financial advisors for January to structure the deal. Part of me had even considered using some of the proceeds to pay off my parents' mortgage entirely or fund college accounts for Vanessa's twins. As December arrived, I threw myself into planning the perfect Christmas dinner. For once, the gathering would be at my place, a concession my mother made only because their dining room was being renovated. I spent weekends selecting the ideal menu, hunting down my father's favorite bourbon, finding the exact ornaments that had decorated our childhood home. I practiced casual ways to mention the acquisition during dinner. Oh, by the way, I might be traveling more next year. My company is expanding internationally. The morning of December 25th arrived with perfect storybook snow falling over Cambridge. I woke at dawn to begin preparing the prime rib, my father's favorite. The table was set with the fine china I'd purchased specially for this occasion. Everything was ready. This would be the Christmas when they finally saw me. They arrived 2 hours late. No calls. No apologies. Just Vanessa's eye roll as she handed me her coat and complained about the parking situation in my neighborhood. My carefully timed meal was overcooked. The perfect moment I'd planned to share my news never materialized. Instead, the conversation revolved around Vanessa's recent charity gala appearance and my father's golf game. I might have still kept my secret if not for the moment when my mother raised her glass for a toast. To family, she said. And to Vanessa's incredible news, the hospital is naming the new pediatric wing after her following her major donation. We couldn't be prouder. The major donation had come from me, $50,000, transferred to Vanessa's foundation last month, which she had apparently claimed as her own charitable giving. I felt something crack inside me, but I held my smile. Until Vanessa spoke. To success, she added her glass clinking against our mother's. Then looking directly at me with that same condescending smile she'd perfected since childhood. You know, Marlo, it's never too late to do something meaningful with your life. Maybe I could help you find a real job at Bradley's hospital. Something stable with benefits. That was the moment everything changed. I was doing something like 500,000 words a year and have published in all the major outlets. You're watching this because my story resonated with you, right? Family dynamics can be so complicated, and sometimes we need to see others stand up for themselves to find our own courage. If you're enjoying this story about family karma coming full circle, please tap that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories like mine. I publish new content every Wednesday, and I'd love to have you join this supportive community that's helping each other navigate complicated family relationships. You're a failure, Marlo. Always have been, always will be. The words escaped Vanessa's perfectly glossed lips so casually as if she were commenting on the weather. My parents didn't gasp. They didn't correct her. My father simply sipped his bourbon, the $200 bottle I'd tracked down, because it was his favorite, and my mother adjusted her napkin on her lap. Their silence was implicit agreement. The Christmas dinner stretched before us, the prime rib I'd spent hours preparing now cooling on bone china plates that had cost me a month's profit. My apartment, the home I'd created, decorated with pieces I'd carefully selected from artists I admired, suddenly felt foreign, as if I were a guest at my own table. Excuse me, I managed my voice steadier than I expected. Oh, don't be so sensitive. Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. I'm just saying what we all know. You've never really accomplished anything significant. Your little hobby business, designing Facebook posts or whatever digital marketing agency I corrected automatically, isn't exactly changing the world, is it? She continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Not like the pediatric wing that's going to save children's lives. Some people make a difference, Marlo. Others just exist. My mother finally interjected. Vanessa, perhaps that's enough. It's Christmas. Not Vanessa, that's cruel and untrue. Not Vanessa, apologize to your sister. Just perhaps that's enough, because the timing was inconvenient, not because the sentiment was wrong. I looked at their faces, these people who shared my blood but had never shared my dreams, who had never once asked about my goals or celebrated my victories. In that moment, I saw them clearly for the first time. The emperor had no clothes. The golden family was pyrite, not gold. You have no idea who I am, I said quietly. You never have. Here we go with the dramatics, Vanessa sighed, sharing a knowing look with our father. This is why we can't have nice family gatherings. Something inside me shifted. The lifetime of seeking approval, of hoping for recognition, crystallized into a cold, hard clarity. I set down my fork deliberately. Did you ever wonder how Dad's practice stayed afloat after the malpractice suit 3 years ago? I asked conversationally. Or how you afford private school for the twins on a hospital administrator's salary, Vanessa? Or why the bank suddenly were financed Mom and Dad's underwater mortgage? Their expressions changed, confusion replacing entry foreman Dad off. Condescension. What are you talking about? My father demanded. Your great-aunt Judith's estate. There is no great-aunt Judith, I said, my voice unnervingly calm. There never was. I reached for my phone, opened my banking app, and slid it across the table. On the screen was a history of transfers, hundreds of them over 3 years, from my business account to the shell company that funded their lives. I've been paying for everything, I continued as they stared at the phone in stunned silence. Your mortgage, the twins' tuition, Dad's new medical equipment, the lease on your car, Mom. And yes, Vanessa, even that major donation that got your name on the pediatric wing. It all came from my little hobby business. The color drained from Vanessa's face. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. My father began to sputter denials. That's impossible, he insisted. You couldn't possibly. I've built a 7-figure company. I cut him off. I have clients in 14 countries. I employ 23 people. Last year, my little hobby generated more revenue than your medical practice ever did, even in its best years. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, snow continued to fall, creating a deceptively peaceful backdrop to the implosion of decades of family mythology. Why would you keep this a secret? My mother finally asked, her voice small. Would it have mattered? I countered. Would knowing I was successful have made you see me differently, or would you have simply found new ways to diminish what I've built? Oh, Marlo got lucky. Marlo's in a trendy field. Anyone could do what Marlo does. No one contradicted me. They couldn't, because we all knew the truth. I kept it secret because I still foolishly hoped that someday you would love me for who I am, not what I achieve, I continued. I thought if I helped quietly, if I solved the problems you couldn't solve yourselves, eventually you might see my worth. Vanessa found her voice first. So this whole time you've been what? Playing God, controlling us with your money. That's sick, Marlo. I laughed then, a genuine laugh of disbelief. That's what you take from this, that I'm controlling you by paying your children's tuition, by keeping a roof over our parents' heads. You should have told us, my father said stiffly. We would have refused the money. Would you? I asked. Would you really have chosen pride over pretense? Because that's not the family I grew up in. We Pierces are all about keeping up appearances, aren't we? The conversation devolved quickly after that. My parents insisted they would have managed fine without my interference. Vanessa accused me of undermining her achievements. The perfect Christmas dinner ended with my mother in tears, my father angrily calling for an Uber, and Vanessa gathering her coat with a wounded dignity that might have been comical if it weren't so predictable. As the door closed behind them, I stood alone in my apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a meal meant to mark my arrival as their equal. Instead, it had become my declaration of independence. That night, I poured myself a glass of the expensive bourbon and opened my laptop. One by one, I canceled every automatic payment, closed every shell account, and terminated every financial arrangement I had created to support my family. By the time I went to bed, the invisible scaffolding that had held up their perfect lives for 3 years had been dismantled. I slept better than I had in decades. January arrived with an Arctic blast that seemed fitting for the freeze in family communications. 3 weeks had passed since the Christmas dinner confrontation, and my phone remained conspicuously silent. No calls from my parents, no passive-aggressive texts from Vanessa. The absence of their demands was strangely liberating, like removing a weight I'd grown so accustomed to carrying that I'd forgotten it was there. I threw myself into finalizing the acquisition deal for my company. The international holding company had increased their offer after our December meeting, impressed by our client retention rates and growth projections. My financial advisor called it life-changing money, but what mattered more was the validation, concrete, undeniable proof that what I'd built had real value. The first domino fell on January 18th. My mother's number flashed on my phone screen as I was reviewing contract details with my lawyer. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was terse. Marlo, there seems to be some mistake with the mortgage payment. Call me back. I didn't. 3 days later, my father called, then Vanessa, then my mother again. Their voicemails evolved from confused to concerned to frantic. By the end of January, the carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. My father's practice received notice from the leasing company about overdue payments on medical equipment. The twins' private school sent Vanessa a letter about tuition arrears. My parents' mortgage lender initiated pre-foreclosure proceedings. I observed it all from a distance, neither intervening nor responding to their increasingly desperate messages. Part of me expected to feel guilt or remorse. Instead, I felt oddly peaceful. For the first time, they were facing reality without cushions or safety nets, just as I had done my entire adult life. February brought the first direct confrontation. My father appeared at my office unannounced, bypassing reception with the authoritative stride of a surgeon accustomed to doors opening for him. He stopped short when he saw my workspace, the wall of industry awards, the sleek conference room where my team was brainstorming for a Fortune 500 client, the unmistakable trappings of legitimate success. "You need to fix this, Marlo," he demanded, lowering his voice as he noticed my employees watching. "Your mother can't sleep. The bank is threatening foreclosure. This vindictive game has gone far enough." I invited him into my private office, offered him a seat he refused to take. "It's not a game," I replied calmly. "The game was pretending I was supporting you through a fictional great-aunt's estate. Reality is what you're experiencing now." "We never asked for your money," he exploded. "No, you just accepted it without question," I countered. "You never once wondered how a distant relative you'd never mentioned suddenly had funds to solve all your problems. You never questioned it because deep down you believe you deserve to be rescued, that the universe should bend to accommodate the great Dr. Pierce and his golden family." His face flushed. "We raised you, put you through college. NYU was covered by my scholarship and student loans that I paid off myself," I corrected him. "You contributed exactly $4,000 to my education. I have the records. Vanessa's Harvard degree cost you $287,000. I checked." He faltered, unused to being contradicted with precise facts. "Families support each other, Marlo. This is cruel." Was it cruel when you missed my college graduation because Vanessa's engagement party was the same weekend? Was it cruel when you called my business a little hobby for years while I was working 80-hour weeks? To build something meaningful, was it cruel when you sat silently while your daughter called me a failure at my own dinner table? He had no answer. "I'm not doing this to punish you," I continued. "I'm doing this because for once I need you all to see me, really see me for who I am. Not as the family disappointment, not as the safety net you never knew you had, just as Marlo." He left without resolving anything. His normally imposing figure somehow diminished. That night, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. "This is Bradley. Vanessa doesn't know I'm contacting you. Can we meet, please?" Bradley Henderson, my brother-in-law Vanessa's husband, had never sought me out before. Curiosity compelled me to agree. We met at a coffee shop halfway between his hospital and my office. Vanessa would kill me if she knew I was here, he began, after ordering a black coffee. He looked tired, the polished veneer of the successful surgeon showing cracks. Things are not good, Marlo. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it. Despite everything, I didn't wish them suffering. No, you're not, he sighed. And honestly, I can't blame you. The way they've treated you, the way we've all treated you, it's indefensible. His candor surprised me. Bradley had always been Vanessa's echo, adopting her perspectives, reinforcing her worldview. The twins might have to leave Dalton, he continued. We can't afford the tuition without whatever you were doing. Vanessa's devastated. She keeps saying they'll fall behind, lose their peer group. There are excellent public schools, I suggested. He laughed humorlessly. Try telling Vanessa that. This identity, the successful surgeon and his philanthropist wife, the perfect children in the prestigious school, it's everything to her. To your parents, too. Without it, they don't know who they are. For the first time, I felt a flicker of sympathy. They were products of a system that valued appearance over substance, credentials over character. In a way, they were as trapped as I had been. What do you want from me, Bradley? He hesitated. Initially, I came to ask if you would reconsider, at least for the twins' sake. They're innocent in all this. But sitting here now, he looked around my office, really seeing me, perhaps for the first time. I think what I really want is to understand how you did it, built something real while the rest of us were constructing elaborate facades. It was the first genuine conversation I'd ever had with my brother-in-law. As we talked, I realized he too had been playing a role, the perfect husband to the golden daughter, the worthy successor to my father's legacy. Beneath it all was a man who had never questioned the script he'd been handed until now. I truly never expected my personal story to resonate with so many of you. The comments on my last video about setting boundaries with family were overwhelming. If you're currently dealing with family members who don't see your worth or are caught in unhealthy dynamics, know that you're not alone. This community has become such a supportive space for sharing these difficult experiences. If my journey through family betrayal and finding my own strength is helping you, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss the next part of this story. The turning point I'm about to share might help you recognize when it's time to stand up for yourself too. And now let's continue with what happened next. March arrived with unexpected developments. My family's financial house of cards continued its collapse, but instead of the satisfaction I'd anticipated, I found myself increasingly conflicted. Not because I doubted my decision to stop the payments that clarity remained, but because watching the aftermath stirred complicated emotions. My conversation with Bradley had planted a seed. The twins Madison and Mason were indeed innocent parties in this family drama. At 10 years old, they couldn't comprehend why they suddenly had to leave their friends at Dalton or why weekend ski trips were canceled. They didn't understand why their grandmother cried during Sunday visits or why their parents argued in hushed, tense voices behind closed doors. I had never intended to punish children for the sins of their parents. After a week of deliberation, I established college funds for the twins, structured so that neither Vanessa nor Bradley could access the money for any other purpose. I didn't tell them immediately this wasn't about earning gratitude or leveraging goodwill. It was simply the right thing to do. Meanwhile, the acquisition deal for my company entered its final stages. The holding company's offer had been generous from the start, but my newfound backbone extended to business negotiations as well. I pushed for better terms, more autonomy, and equity stakes for my key employees. To my surprise, they agreed to most of my demands. The contract was set to be signed on March 15th. 3 days before the signing, my mother appeared at my door. Unlike my father's confrontational office visit, She arrived bearing peace offerings, old photo albums, my childhood teddy bear. She'd somehow preserved home-baked cookies that had been my favorite growing up. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual authoritative edge. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She entered cautiously as if my apartment were foreign territory, which in many ways it was. How many times had she visited in the 6 years I'd lived here? Twice, 3 times. She settled on my couch, arranging her offerings on the coffee table. "I found these while packing," she said. "We're downsizing. The house. Well, we can't afford to keep it anymore." The 6-bedroom colonial in Brookline had been their pride, the physical manifestation of their success. Its loss represented more than financial setback, it was the crumbling of identity. "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. "Are you?" She looked up, her eyes searching mine. "Your father thinks this is revenge. Vanessa calls it cruelty. But I've been thinking that maybe..." She paused. "Maybe it's something else entirely." I sat across from her waiting. "You were always different," she continued. "Even as a little girl." Vanessa needed constant validation, applause, recognition. She still does. "But you built sandcastles at the beach and didn't care if anyone saw them before the tide came in. You read books nobody assigned you. You drew pictures and hid them in your desk drawer instead of bringing them home for the refrigerator." I was startled by her observations, not because they were wrong, but because they were right. I hadn't realized she'd noticed such things. "We didn't know what to do with you," she admitted. "Your father and I, we understand achievement in very specific terms, degrees, titles, income brackets. Vanessa gave us that. You gave us uncertainty. So you decided I was a failure." I concluded. She winced. "We decided you were a mystery. And rather than try to understand the mystery, we took the easier path. We focused on what we understood." It wasn't quite an apology, but from my mother, a woman who had spent her career never admitting weakness in courtrooms across Massachusetts, it was unprecedented. "Why are you here, Mom?" She smoothed her skirt, a gesture I remembered from childhood when she was gathering courage. "2 reasons. First, to tell you that we've found a buyer for the house. We're moving to a condo in Newton next month. Your father is joining a group practice instead of running his own. We'll be fine, not what we're used to, but fine." I nodded, relieved despite myself. I had wanted them to face reality, not suffer needlessly. "And the second reason, to give you this." She reached into her purse and pulled out a faded envelope, my name written on it in handwriting I didn't recognize. "Your grandmother left this for you before she died. I was supposed to give it to you on your 30th birthday. I kept it instead." My paternal grandmother had died when I was in college. I had adored her, spending summers at her Cape Cod cottage while Vanessa attended prestigious academic camps. Grandma Pierce had been the one person in the family who seemed to understand me, who valued my creativity and independence. "Why would you keep this from me?" I asked, taking the envelope with trembling hands. "Because I read it," she admitted. And I was ashamed. Inside was a letter written in my grandmother's elegant script and a key. The letter explained that she had established a trust for me separate from the family inheritance because she recognized in me a spirit that needed freedom to find its own path. The key belonged to a safe deposit box containing the trust documents. "She knew," my mother said, quietly. "She knew you would build something meaningful in your own way, on your own terms. She saw what we couldn't or wouldn't see." I read the letter twice, tears blurring the words. My grandmother's faith in me had been there all along, a secret affirmation I never knew existed. The trust I finally managed. What happened to it? My mother's composure cracked. "Nothing. It's still there. We never touched it. I couldn't bring myself to tell you about it because it would mean admitting she understood you better than I did, that she valued the very qualities in you that I failed to appreciate." According to the letter, the trust had been conservatively invested for over a decade. Its value now likely exceeded seven figures, money that had been rightfully mine for years while I worked overtime building my business while I silently funded my family's lifestyle. Why now? I asked. After all this time, why give me this now? Because you forced us to see you, she replied simply. The real you, not who we wanted you to be. And once I saw you clearly, I couldn't keep this from you anymore. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't even reconciliation. But it was a crack in the foundation of decades of misunderstanding. A possibility that something new might grow in the rubble of what had been destroyed. After she left, I called Bradley. The twins' tuition, I said, without preamble. It's taken care of through the end of the school year, and I've set up college funds for them. His relief was palpable. Marlo, I don't know what to say. Say you'll make sure they grow up knowing they're valued for who they are, not what they achieve, I replied. Break the cycle. The next day, I visited the bank and opened my grandmother's safe deposit box. Inside, beyond the trust documents, was a small notebook filled with her observations about me, from childhood things I'd said, questions I'd asked, projects I'd created. She had seen me, really seen me all along. Her belief had been a silent force in my life, even though I hadn't known it existed. 2 days later, I signed the acquisition deal. My little hobby business officially became part of a global enterprise, with me retaining leadership and creative control. The payment that hit my account that afternoon would have made even my father's eyes widen. That night, I sat in my apartment alone, surrounded by the life I had built, thinking about the invisible threads that connect choices to consequences, wounds to healing, endings to new beginnings. The story wasn't over. Family histories never really end, but a significant chapter had closed. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. We need to talk. The cafe Vanessa chose for our meeting was neutral territory, not my turf, not hers, but a trendy spot in Seaport District where neither of us was likely to be recognized. I arrived early, selecting a corner table that offered privacy without isolation. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the perfectly coiffed blonde hair, replaced by a simpler, shorter cut. Her designer outfit had been swapped for jeans and a sweater that, while still quality pieces, lacked the ostentatious branding she'd favored before. But the most striking change was in her demeanor. The imperious confidence had diminished, replaced by something more tentative. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sliding into the seat across from mine. No air kisses, no performance of sisterly affection, just simple acknowledgement. Bradley told me about the twins' tuition and college funds, she continued, after ordering a plain coffee, not her usual complicated specialty drink. He thinks I don't know, but we don't keep secrets anymore. At least we're trying not to. I nodded, waiting. This was her meeting her agenda. I'm angry with you, she stated plainly. I want to be clear about that. What you did, cutting us off without warning, letting us crash it, was cruel. Perhaps, I conceded. But no crueler than being called a failure at my own dinner table after decades of dismissal. She flinched but didn't argue the point. Mom gave you Grandma's letter. Yes. I knew about it, she admitted. I found it in Mom's desk years ago. I should have told you. The revelation stung, but less than it might have months earlier. Why didn't you? Vanessa stared into her coffee. Because I was jealous. Grandma Pierce adored you. She respected me, was proud of me in her way, but she connected with you. That letter proved what I'd always suspected. She saw something special in you that she didn't see in me. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I had envied Vanessa, our parents' approval, she had envied me, our grandmother's affection. I've been thinking a lot about why I said what I said at Christmas, she continued. The failure comment. It wasn't really about you at all. It was about me. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. My life was falling apart, she explained. Bradley and I were fighting constantly about money. The hospital administration job doesn't pay what people assume. We were drowning in debt trying to maintain appearances. When I looked at you so self-sufficient, so unbothered by what others thought, I hated you for it. Calling you a failure was really about me projecting my own failures onto you. It was perhaps the most honest thing Vanessa had ever said to me. The pediatric wing donation, I said. Did you know that came from me? She shook her head. Not until Christmas. I genuinely thought it was from the Pierce Family Foundation. That's how Dad presented it to me. He handled all the paperwork. Her face flushed with shame. My name is on a hospital wing I didn't actually fund. And now the hospital knows the truth, she replied. I told them myself. They're removing my name from the wing. It was humiliating but necessary. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of misunderstanding between us. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Vanessa finally said. I don't deserve it yet. And I'm not asking you to resume financial support. We're figuring things out. Bradley took a second position at a community clinic. We've moved to a smaller house. The twins are. She hesitated. They're actually doing fine at public school. Better than fine. They have more diverse friends and the teachers are excellent. I'm glad to hear that, I said sincerely. What I am asking for is a chance, she continued. A chance to know my sister, the real Marlo, not the version of you I constructed to make myself feel superior. Why should I give you that chance? I asked, not unkindly but honestly. Because we're family, she started, then caught herself. No, that's not right. That's the old thinking that blood entitles people to connection regardless of behavior. The real reason is because I think we've both lost enough already. And because I think there might be something worth saving here if we're both willing to build something new on honest ground. I considered her words, searching her face for the manipulation or performance I'd grown accustomed to. Instead, I found something unfamiliar in my sister's expression: vulnerability. I can't promise anything, I said finally. But I'm willing to try. She nodded, understanding. This was neither forgiveness nor reconciliation, not yet. It was simply an opening, a possibility. As we prepared to leave, she asked, "The acquisition deal it went through?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Last week." "Congratulations," she said. And for perhaps the first time in our adult lives, her praise contained no subtext, no backhanded component. Just simple acknowledgement of my achievement. You built something remarkable, Marlo. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. In that moment, I realized that while my financial support had been withdrawn, something more valuable had taken its place: truth. Painful, uncomfortable, necessary truth that had forced us all to see ourselves and each other clearly for the first time. 1 year later, I stood in my new office overlooking Boston Harbor, watching sailboats crisscross the water on a perfect June day. The acquisition had transformed my company's reach while allowing me to maintain creative control. My team had doubled our client list, now included household names across 3 continents, and the financial security I'd achieved exceeded even my grandmother's optimistic projections. But the most significant changes weren't professional, they were personal. My parents had settled into their Newton condo, adapting to their downsized lifestyle with surprising resilience. My father, freed from the administrative burdens of running his own practice, had rediscovered his passion for medicine at the group practice. My mother had taken on pro bono cases for a nonprofit legal aid organization, work she described as more fulfilling than corporate law ever was. Vanessa and Bradley had rebuilt their lives on more authentic foundations. Their new home in a middle-class neighborhood was modest by their previous standards, but paid for with their actual earnings rather than my silent subsidies. The twins were thriving in public school, developing into more grounded, empathetic children than their exclusive private education had fostered. As for my relationship with my family, it remained a work in progress. We were learning to relate to each other as the people we actually were, not the roles we had played for decades. Sometimes it was awkward, sometimes it was painful, but it was always real, which made it infinitely more valuable than the polite fiction we had maintained before. The Christmas dinner disaster that had catalyzed everything was now referenced with rueful humor rather than shame. Remember when Marlo finally snapped and destroyed our perfect family facade? Vanessa had joked at Thanksgiving. Best thing that ever happened to us. She wasn't entirely wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. Your 2 p.m. is here. The Pierces were gathering at my place that evening to celebrate my birthday, a simple dinner, nothing elaborate, just family being together without pretense or performance. Before that, I had one more meeting to conclude a chapter of this journey. Bradley had asked for my help establishing a free clinic in an underserved neighborhood. I had agreed to fund it, but with conditions: no family names on the building, no recognition beyond a small plaque acknowledging community supporters. The focus would be on the work itself, not who got credit for it. As I prepared to meet with the project manager, I reflected on the lessons of the past year. The sister who had called me a failure had inadvertently triggered a chain of events that freed us all from a lifetime of toxic family dynamics. The money I had used to prop up their perfect image had ultimately been better invested in building something authentic. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't offering support, it's withdrawing it and allowing people to find their own strength. Sometimes the truest form of self-respect isn't seeking validation, it's recognizing your worth even when others don't see it. And sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't about hurting those who hurt you, it's about creating a life so authentic and fulfilling that their approval becomes irrelevant. I wouldn't change a thing. Wow, I can't believe how many of you have shared your own family justice stories in the comments. This community has become such a meaningful space for real conversations about complicated family dynamics. Has someone in your family ever underestimated you only to later realize their mistake? Or have you experienced a moment when standing your ground changed everything? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries with family. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Sometimes the family we choose is more supportive than the one we're born into. Until next time, remember that your worth isn't determined by others' perception of you.